Now we're going to talk about what you need to do if you get in a situation where both canopies get deployed at the same time. In this case, both your main and reserve are deployed into the air. There's three different situations that we'll talk about. The first is called a biplane, where the canopies are basically stacked right on top of each other. In this case, you're going to leave the brakes stowed and you're going to still steer the front canopy with the rear risers if you can. If you can't control the front canopy with the rear risers, you can try to control the canopy with the front toggles also. In this situation, you're going to want to fly as straight as possible and don't flare for landing. You want to be ready to PLF once you land, but a cutaway is not recommended. This is considered a stable biplane configuration, and ideally these two canopies stacked on top of each other will stay in a stable situation. This is the second configuration for having two canopies out, called side by side. The canopies are effectively in a stable configuration, bumping together and staying close together. You have two options in this situation. First, if the canopies are not entangled, you can cut away the main parachute and land and fly the reserve parachute. You have to make sure the canopies are not entangled. If you cut away and the main parachute is entangled, it can create more of a situation because your reserve can become entangled also. The second option is to keep both canopies, do not cut away, and fly the canopies together to landing. In this situation, you're going to use the rear risers to try and keep the canopies bumping together. You're going to want the canopies to stay together, that way they don't split apart and turn into the third scenario of a downplane. This is the third scenario, called a downplane. In a downplane, both the main and reserve parachute are basically pointed directly at the ground. In this situation, you're going to want to cut away the main parachute and then land under the reserve parachute. It is possible to collide with another jumper in the air. One way to prevent this is to look before you turn. Always look in the direction of the turn before you start the turn. The lower jumper does have the right of way, so the jumper that is the lowest has less visibility above them, so they have the right of way. If you end up facing another jumper straight head on, both jumpers are going to turn to the right to try and avoid each other. If you do collide, the first thing you need to do is to start communicating with the other jumper. If it's too low for a safe cutaway, then both jumpers need to deploy their reserve parachute if their main parachutes are not controllable. The idea is that get as much canopy out into the air as possible. If you do have a main canopy that is controllable, you're going to try and flare that canopy for the lowest jumper.